All right. Good afternoon once more. Thank you guys for sparing your time so that you can attend these catch-up sessions for TPG201. I am somehow disappointed by the number. I don't think it's only like 20 plus students who do not understand the content or what we are doing. Please, if you have your friends on some groups, please do inform them that there are catch-up sessions happening for students who feel like they didn't get the proper introduction to the module. Please do that, and then let us see what we can try to come up with in order to be on terms with the other guys. Okay, presenting is Mr. Langa. I assume most, if not all of you know me. So we are going to start from scratch, like the basic foundation of the IDE. We get to use some of the common controls that we'll always use throughout the module. And then please, if there is something that you do not understand, or if I am moving too fast, please just stop me and tell me to catch a breather. Please, ne? So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So at this point, I'm assuming every one of us was able to install our C++ Builder IDE. Are there those who are still stuck at the downloading and installation phase? So we all have the IDE installed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Who can I trust?
Hey, who are you?
Whom can I trust to admit these people who are not using their TUT for life emails? Whom can I trust? Let me see. Whom can I trust? Any volunteer to help me as I'm presenting to admit those who are waiting in the lobby? Like you see, I'm going to get these random pop-ups and they're going to disturb me. Whom can I trust to admit them? Anyone?
Sir. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah?
We'll admit them. Continue, sir. We'll admit.
Okay. You are getting the pop-ups on your side?
Yeah, we're getting the pop-ups.
Oh, thank you, sir. Please handle that for me. All right. Let's start. So what we see right now is the interface or the environment of C++ Builder. The version that I'm using is 10.3 Community Edition. I'm sure you might be using 10.4 as I've seen there's a new release. But all in all, there's no difference between them. So what we are going to do is just go through what's on our screen right now, describe each section in terms of what it does or how it helps us. So from the top left, we have a section called structure. This section tells us how our interface on this form is designed. So as you can see already, we already have form 1, which tells us that form 1 will be the parent application or the parent window. So what happens now is everything that we are going to put on our form, any control that we are going to have on our form will be a child to the form. So a form is basically the application's main window. For example, when I open my Explorer, like this, as you can see, this whole thing that I'm dragging right now is actually a form. As you can see with this close, maximize, minimize buttons, this is actually a form. And all the other things that you see here were actually designed. So a form will be our application's main window, and it will be the first thing that executes when our application runs. Okay, now that is out of the way, if we also now take a look on the right hand side where we have some folders and files there This is where we are going to see all our project files. All our project files will be displayed here. Those who are coming from a Visual Studio environment, this is similar to the solution explorer, where we used to have our folders there. We used to put our CPP files and our header files. So this is where all our files that we work with are going to be seen. And then bottom left, very important, we have the object inspector. As the name says, object inspect. This is where we are going to inspect each and every object that we put on the form. By object, I am referring to the controls. Things like buttons, text boxes, labels, they are all objects. And I'm going to show you why I'm saying they are all objects when we go over to the .h file. So every object that we put here, we can inspect it. Oh no, what did I do now? Every object that we put on the form, we are able to inspect it. And by inspecting it, I mean we are able to give it some of the property values and some of the events. We will also come back to those two. And then on our bottom right, we have what we call a palette. In full, some call it a tools palette. This is where we are going to find all the objects that we want to use for designing our user interface. For example, if we expand the standard folder, I'll say folder, we can see there are some numerous controls there. For example, there's a frame, there's a main menu, there's a memo, there's a T button and whatnot. All of these things that you see here, they are actually objects. And as a result, we are able to inspect each object according to the properties listed here. So now, before we go even further, I am just going to design just a simple interface consisting of number one, a button, as you can see here, a button coming from the standard drop down, or if you want to quickly search it, you can always just type the name of that object. So you can see when we type button, we have numerous things that consist of the word button. We have a T button, which is the standard button that we always use. And then we also have a radio group button, which is a circular button where I think you come across this probably when you have a choice of things and you only want to select one of them. We also have a T-speed button, which you'll never use in this module. A T-spin button and a TC-spin button. This you might use maybe in tutorial or practice one. But for now, let us focus on this button. So this is the button. With every control, there is always at max one important property that we should always work with. For example, if we have a button right now, sorry, can you please mute your mic? Mr. Matala. Okay. Evan. Okay. So now, as I was saying, with every object that we place on the form, at least one important property has to be given attention to. And the name of that property will always be name. This is the property that you will always have to pay attention to with every control that's placed on the form. And I'm saying it's important because this is the property which is going to help us identify the type of control that we want to use when we actually start coding in our CPP file. So great. If we have a button right now, I'm going to quickly start by giving it a name. So I'll just say the name of this button is Press Me. I'll just say that is the name for now. Button, Press Me. Now, also pay attention to the naming standard being used here. Because it's a button, I'm starting the word with the prefix B, T, L. Now, if it was maybe a label, which I'm going to add after this, you will see that the prefix of it has to start with L, B, L, so that the names can be a little bit descriptive even to the programmer. Great. Now, the name is already given and the name is given BTN Press Me. So you can see once I give it a name, it also updates on the text that's visible on the button. Now, the text that is showing here on the button, it is actually the caption of this button. Now, I'm sure most of you will know what caption means because I think you have some Instagram accounts. When you post a picture there, you always say, hey, no caption, even though there is a caption itself, but you always say no caption. So the caption is what appears on top of this view. So the caption, the property caption, as we go through the object inspector, you will see that there is a property called caption, and by default, it will always be assigned the value of name. The value of name. So we can change that so that it can make a little bit more sense to the programmer by saying this is the text that should actually appear on the button. So our button there, the name is Press Me, and the text that is shown on the button also says Press Me. Now, let's go ahead and add a little label there. So the idea of what we are trying to do right now is just to say, when we press this particular button, this label should increment to keep track of the number of times we are pressing or we have pressed this button. Again, label, first thing first, I need to give it a name which I am going to use when I am coding. So I'm going to say LBL because this is a label. So I'm going to say LBL count presses or something like that. LBL count presses, and then I will say the caption of this label should be 0. That is where we want to start. So I'm just going to quickly just change the font of this label by going to the font property, and then on the right hand side I just double click, and then it gives me this dialog where I can choose the font name, the font style, the size of the font. Yes, sir?
Excuse me, sir. Yeah,
Yes.
sir, we have an issue here. Your font, like the way we see it's small, we can't see what you're doing. Like when you type, we only see small letters. We're not even sure if you see like your Press Me. We can see it's a Press Me, but it's small, very small. So can you just increase the font size?
The font size of the button, or you mean my screen? Are
Yeah,
you
your
referring
screen,
to
or
my
you can,
screen?
yeah, your screen. You can zoom. Can you just zoom it so it's because some of us use glasses, we can't see. Just zoom it. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
All right. Earlier I did this, and then someone says, no, don't zoom. You are hitting our eyes. So unfortunately, I can't go to 150. I can only be at 200. I just hope everyone can bear with this. But anyway, let's continue. So let me change the font of that label probably to 14. The color is fine. I want it as black. And then, yeah, here's my label at 14. So now this is my mini application. It's already designed. I will say designed, although this is just some lazy designing, but I will say it's designed, and this is the label. So the logic here, what's happening here is I want us to create an application whereby when we press this button, this label keeps track of the number of times we have actually pressed this button. So we press this button, this should update to 1. We press it again, update to 2. We press it again, and so on and so on. But now, before we actually get to that part, I want us to look at our object inspector once more. So if we look at our object inspector, it actually has 2 tabs. The first tab, which is the default selected tab, it deals with the properties. Sorry. And when we speak of properties, what we're actually saying is the properties refer to the things that we can do on
the control.
Thank you, sir. I don't know who's that, but thank you. The things that can be done on a control. Ne? And then if we look at the second tab, which is written events there, this is the tab that says with that button, these are the events that can be raised using our button. So with our button, we can raise an event which is called on click, which is an event that will execute when we click a button. There's also other events here that we can also take a look at, but all in all, for a button, this is the only event that we'll always be interested in, because that's the job of a button. The job of a button is to be clicked, is to be pressed. So therefore, we will always use the on-click event when dealing with buttons. Now, if we go to our label as well, it also has its own events that it can raise. Again, it still has the on-click event. And now I'm referring to the label. As you can see here, the selected control is a label. So with a label, it is also able to trigger an event for the on-click, meaning when we click that label, we can say this should happen. There's also an event which is on DBL click, which means on double click. So the label can trigger an event to say if someone presses me double, if someone double clicks me, then I can raise a particular event and a certain code can execute. That is why before the beginning, like in the beginning of all of this, we introduced you guys to the concept of event-driven programming. A programming that happens based on the events. And when we say events, this is what we are referring to. This is what we are referring to. Great. Now, before I even start to create any event, I want us to go over to the unit1.h. And then I want us to examine this file and make sense of what is happening. Now, initially, we actually have a class. That's the first thing that you should take note of. We actually have a class. And what is that class? That class is a form. That class is a form. This guy, this whole guy here. This is actually a class. Now, if we go back to the header file, you will see that within this class, there are some things which are declared. We have our button, we have our label, which are the two controls which we placed where? On or inside the form. Now, these were automatically declared for us as we were busy dragging and dropping. Now, importantly, they will always be put or declared under the published specifier. I'm emphasizing on this because somewhere in your web test, you may be asked, these controls that are designed on the form, under which specifier are they Are they declared? Something like that in your web test. I want you to also take note of the following comment. IDE managed components, which means any component that we will put on our IDE, the IDE refers to the form in this case. Any component or any control or any object that we place on the form, it will always be declared under the published specifier. Now, taking a look at the private and the public specifiers, we notice that under the private, there is nothing currently. There is nothing. But there is a comment that says user declarations. So in a case where in our application we are going to be declaring additional variables or arrays or whatever, we are actually welcome to come and declare them within this space. Now you will remember in TPG201, anything that's private is actually a data member. Usually your variables, your arrays, your pointers and whatnot. And under the public specifier, we used to have our methods. Ne? Great. So, yes? Yes?
I want to ask something about these declarations of
Yeah.
private. Because this is a class of our form. Ne? So everything that we declare under private or public is going to be available in any method or any method that we use, which is inherited from the T-form class.
Exactly. So what's happening here? What's happening here is 99% of the time, these are the controls that we will be using in our application, right? So whatever that we declare under either private or public, these guys here have direct access to them. Why? Because they are all declared within the same class.
Okay. And are we also welcome to declare a variable in any method or method which is part of the T-form class?
Are we also allowed to declare
a variable? Like if we have a function for on click, then are we able to declare a variable
within
function?
Oh, yeah, within that event handler method, ne? You can also declare some things. If you want to quickly just declare something and quickly work around it, you are welcome to do that. I'm sorry if I'm muting the person who was asking a question right now. But yes, inside our event handler, which we are also going to cover, ne, you can also declare some variables if you want to quickly just work with them and whatnot. But remember the scope. Ne? Once you declare a variable within a particular method, that variable can only exist within that particular method. But now if I declare it under the private specifier like this, all the methods, even the event handlers, will have access to this variable. And for the example that I want us to do, it's going to be very important for us to declare our count here and not within a button, because we don't want to declare inside a button whereby if we declare inside a button and we initialize to 0, it means every time we press that button, our count will always reset back to 0. Rather, what we want is our count to be 0 only when the application starts, but as we are clicking the button, we want our count to increase, not to be reinitialized. Is that fine? So at a later stage, when we ask you to probably define some method, some class method, you are going to come and define it here. No, you still remember how to declare a class method? We usually start with the data type, the return type of the function, followed by name of the function, and then some parameters if they are there. If you still remember the correct way to do a prototype. So this is where we are going to declare it. But please pay attention to the question. It can say please define or declare a function, or it can say please define or declare a class method. If it's a class method, it means it must belong to this class. But if it's just a method, it does not have to belong inside a class. Now, again, very important, coming back to these two guys here. Take note of the star which is placed before their names. This actually tells us that each control, I don't know where I can write this comment, let me just put it here. Each control is actually a class instance. By a class instance, I mean it's an object coming from another class. So all the things that you see that start with the letter T in front, it means this is actually a class. So it means there's a class called T button, same way as there's a class called T form. There's a class also called T label, and from those classes, you'll remember even in TPG201, if you are to declare an object within another class, then you have to make it a pointer, because we do not want to work with copy objects. Rather, we always want to refer to the original object. That is why when this button was created, it is created in the form of a pointer, storing the original address of a button that was placed on the form. Does that make sense? Confirmation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Now, because these are now, let me comment here, this is now not just an object, but it is now a pointer object. A pointer object. You'll remember, if it was just an object, then we are going to just use the dot notation. We can just say button press me dot something. But now this is a pointer object, meaning the dot notation will no longer work. We will now be using the member resolution operator, which is the special arrow notation, a dash and a greater than sign. That is why on most of our code we are using this sign. We are using it because this thing is declared as a pointer object. Great. Now, if that makes sense, it's time for us to put our mouths where they belong, meaning we must prove our actions now. So now let's come back to our button. Sorry, let me resume. Coming back to our button, which is press me. We want this button, when we press it, to execute some code. But for us to do that, it means we must first have an event attached to this button. We must first have an event attached to this button. Now, if you remember from one of the slides, we said an event is actually an action generated by the user. So that action, we want to choose the on click. So we want to say when the user presses this button, the action that should occur is the on click. Okay, and then what is actually being created when we create an event? We are obviously going to double click inside this box. Okay, by double clicking, we are creating what we call an event handler. An event handler is a method that handles the event, if I can just put it like that. An event handler is a method. Okay, let's start there. An event handler is a method. This thing is a function itself. But what does it do? It will handle the event generated by the user. So you will see as soon as you start to double click on this box next to on click, it will create the following. Someone's mic is disturbing me. So as soon as you double click right there by the on click, it generates this method. And this method we refer to it as the event handler, because it will attempt to handle the event which will be caused by or generated by the user when the user does what? When the user clicks this button. So this is the event handler method. So within this method, we are going to write piece of code that will execute when the user presses or clicks this button. Does it make sense to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Joshua,
sir.
are there no questions that you want to ask at this point? No questions from no one? Nothing? You're welcome to also type it there by the oops. So your screen isn't clear. I can't see. Oops. So for those who can't see my screen, please just leave the meeting and rejoin. Sometimes it's just the bandwidth, it's too much for your network or your internet connection. But I best believe I know my screen is visible. But yeah, anyway, let's continue. Now, inside this event handler, I don't know if I can just comment here. Event handler. Inside this event handler, we are going to write a piece of code. And this piece of code will always get executed when the user clicks this button called button press me. So whenever this button press me is clicked, then all the code in here is going to get executed. Except if we have some conditional statements, some if statements, then some of the code will get executed and some will be skipped. Now, what is the objective of our application? Our objective of our application is to actually count the number of times we are pressing this button. Now, if you may also remember, inside unit1.h, I declared my count there under the private specifier. So because even event handlers are still part of the form, if I start typing count here, I'm able to have full and direct access to that variable because all of this is part of class tform1. As you can see, even on the event handler, it says this is a method coming from a tform1 class. And to prove that, if we can just quickly return back to the header file, I want you guys to see something. Look here. When we created an event, that event was also declared here using the keyword fast call. So whenever you see fast call, just know that this is an event. Fast call will always mean this is an event. Not all methods are event, but the ones that have fast call are events. So you will see this is a void. It does not return anything because it's just a button. We are going to press it. And then this was declared for us on our behalf. Let's Kantaisha, guys, please. Okay. Now, with that being said, that's the reason why even when we type count inside our event handler, we're able to retrieve it because all of these are within the same class. Great. Now let's go back to our unit.cpp. Now, looking at the first method, which is always given, this is the constructor of the form, meaning this method will always be the first one to get executed when we run our application. So if we come in here and we now say, since this is the method that always gets executed when the application starts, why then can't we start by initializing our count every time when the application starts? This is the constructor of the form, ne guys? And remember, whenever we instantiate or we declare an object, the constructor automatically gets called. So now, why can't we say when this thing or when the application starts, when the constructor is being called, why can't we just initialize our data member to 0? And you will recall, even in TPG201, we used to say to you guys, inside the constructor of a particular class, this is where you initialize all your data members to default values. So same thing with our constructor here. We can initialize all our private data members to default values inside. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So now that we have that out of the way, we can now say when this button is clicked, let us now keep track of the number of times it was clicked. So we are going to say count equals to count plus 1. For those who are already programming savvy, we can always just say count plus is the same thing. Ne? So as we press this button, you will realize that it's busy keeping track of the number of times this button was pressed. So if I can now take this count and make it display where? On this particular label. Now you will remember that for a value to be displayed on a label, we are using the property caption. This is responsible for displaying the value on or whatever text on a particular control. Great. So now I want to take my count and make it become visible or send it to my control, which is label count. So I'm going to start by typing the name of the control. If you are not sure of the name, always go over to the unit1.h and you'll find the name of your control there, and then you just copy it, you return to the CPP file, then you can paste. Now, you'll remember when I was explaining this side, I said these things are declared as pointer object. Therefore, we cannot use the dot notation. Rather, we are going to use the special arrow symbol. So to emphasize on that, what I meant was, because this is a pointer object, we cannot say dot here. It will give us an error. We cannot say dot. Rather, we are going to use the special arrow notation, or we can call it the member resolution operator. Now, when we do this, we are now saying on this label, please point to a property called caption. Now, this property caption that you see here is actually a setter and a getter property, meaning it's able to set a value and it's also able to retrieve value. Now, these two statements will occur regarding or depending on which side of the equation did you put this expression. So if it's on the left hand side, it means I want to take whatever is on the left and assign it to the one that's on the right. So this is now acting as a setter. But now, if this was on the right and I had something on the left, for example, I had something like a variable there, string, and is equals to. Now, if this was on the right hand side, we are now saying, please get the caption and bring the caption and save it into this variable. Therefore, at this point in time, our caption property is acting as a getter because we are getting something from it. Great. So now what we currently want to do is actually set a value. We want to put a value on our caption. Therefore, this expression will be on the left hand side. Therefore, we are going to say, please go and say the caption is count, which is the value that we are incrementing per press. Any questions before we run our application? Questions? Try this says, even double clicking the button on design, will it create the event handler or it will create something else? Okay, in terms of double clicks, guys, here's what happens. each control on the form has events listed in alphabetical order, as you can see. I've heard someone say the popular event is the one that's going to get created if you click on your control. So now let's attempt this and let's double click on our label and see which event it will generate. Ne? So double click, you'll see it chose the on click event. Maybe because it was the first one listed as an event, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Now let's go back and let's work with the form now. Let's double click on the form and see if it's going to create the on activate event or if it will create something else. So let's see. Double click on the form and then this is the event that got created, which is the form create. So let's see on create. Do you see it's not the first one? So what really happens is if you double click on a control, it will generate the most common or the most popular event for that control. Are you answered? I'm not sure if it's a Miss or Mr. Twadi. So that's what happens when you double click on a control. So another question is, say, why initialize count on T-form 1 but not on button function? Thank you for that, Mr. Madamalala. Let me demonstrate why. Let us go and try to execute our button. So I want this gone. So now let us take this and bring it here. Remember, guys, again, whenever this thing is clicked, all the code will get executed. Remember that. So for me to run my project, I actually have to save it first. So I'm going to create a nice folder for us there. I'll say Ketchups. And then inside Ketchups, I'll probably say session 1 project or something like that. And then inside, then that's when I'll start saving our work. So I'll say session 1 unit, save the second file. I'll say session 1 pch save, followed by the last file, which is the project file. I'll say session 1 project. So now my files are saved accordingly and correctly. So now I can go and debug my application. So I want you to take note of this count if it will work properly according to how I have answered Mr. Madamalala. So let's wait for it to compile. Compile. Linking, and then there it goes. So the logic here is, I want to also just display the code. When we press this for the first time, it should say 1. We press it again, it should say 2. Press it again, 3, 4, and so on and so on. So I'm going to press for the first time. And when I press for the first time, all of this code in here executes. So it started by initializing my count to 0, and then it did what? It incremented my count by 1. That's why we are getting a display of 1. But now let's see what will happen if we press it again. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Because why? It's busy resetting our count back to 0. Are we getting that, Mr. Madamalala? Every time we press this button, the reinitialization occurs. It starts again at 0 and it adds 1 on top of 0. That's why we will always get the output of 1. Is that clear to everyone?
Oh, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, why don't you
Yes.
initialize the 0 at where you declare the account?
Where I declared the count.
Initialize
Okay, Mr. Majum, you will notice inside the class, no initialization is supposed to happen. These are the rules that even we come with from TPG201. You'll remember even in 111, all we did was declare our variables there. And then somewhere in the constructor, that's where we used to give our variables some default values. So this is not allowed. Ne? This is not allowed. Please do not do this. It's not allowed. We only initialize in a particular method, not inside the class. That is why I was saying it's going to be best for us to initialize our count where? Inside the constructor of the form. Because when the compiler executes this file, again, it will execute it line by line, up until where we get to events. Now, when it sees this is the instantiation of form 1. And remember, when we instantiate an object, the constructor method automatically gets called. So we are saying when that constructor gets called, at least for the first time, then that is where we want to initialize our count. So now if we run our program again with count moved to the constructor, we are actually supposed to get a proper output. So let's see, initially it's 0. And then if I say press me, it says 1. If I press again, it now says 2, because it's no longer resetting my count to 0. It's keeping track of the initial 0, and then now all I do is keep on incrementing to the previous count. So you'll see it will always go on. Up until when? Up until I decide to stop the application and rerun it again. That's when I'm going to get the value of 0. Is that clear to everyone? That is why I said, please, when you want to declare some variables within your event, just make sure that that value or that variable that you are declaring in here will not affect your output. It's not something that you are building on. Again, it's just some one-time variable that you just want to use to retrieve something from the form, and then you use it for other things. So proper declaration will be inside unit1.h, or your header file, as we used to call it. How is that, guys? Any questions? So tform1 function as is our constructor. Yes, I will assume you say you wanted to say it's our constructor. So yes, tform1 function, this method that is always at the top of everything, this one, this is actually our constructor. And how do we know it's our constructor? Our constructor does not have a return type. So you can see there's no void, there's no nothing before. It's just first call. Ne? So this is the forms constructor method. Yes, I don't know who wanted to ask. Let me just get that up. Yeah.
I was asking something quickly.
Yes,
I wanted clarity on certain things. So, sir,
yes,
when we create an application, right?
Uh-huh.
Do we always initialize in the constructor and not in the actual form?
It will be wise to initialize in the constructor.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, but as we move along, I'm going to show you other events where you can actually initialize your variables. But the constructor, if you're not sure where, the constructor is the best place to go. Any other questions? Yes, Dube. Just unmute and ask. I don't think you're main. You have to. Yes, Madube.
I want to know, will one be incorrect if they declare and initialize the account on the button function, on the button event handler?
You will not be wrong, but okay, syntactically, you will not be wrong. Again, in terms of syntax, you will be correct. But now, logically, you will be incorrect because, as you have seen, the output is not what we want. So if we initialize inside our event handler of a button, when we press, it cannot move to the next number because it keeps on saying count is equals to 0. Because
yes, but
this. Okay.
Declare and initialize.
Yeah, I can. Yes, okay. I can always come and say.
And then remove that other one.
Count press is equals to 0, right? And then I keep replacing these things with the one that we have declared and initialized in here. Is this what you mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's debug our application. Same story, né? Same story. Because here's what happens, guys. Maybe you're not catching this properly. To press this button, we needed an event, again, which was created during design time. Now, that event, when it was created along with what? An event handler, a method that will handle that event. So it means this code that is inside this event handler will always get executed when this button is pressed. That is why when we press this button for the first time, it's able to initialize our count press to 0. It's able to increment it by 1. It's also able to display it. But now, if we go again and press it, it repeats the same steps again. It takes our count, it resets it back to 0, and it now adds 1 again on 0. We have the answer of 1. That is why every time I keep pressing this, I will always get the output 1 because of this redeclaration and initialization. Is it fine, Madube?
So I have another question now. So I was busy with tutorials, and I think there was a question whereby it says we must count vowels. I think it was a practice 1. How many vowels are there? And then, okay, which means this method works whenever there is a loop
Which method? The one for counting vowels.
Yes.
Okay, the one for counting vowels, you are going to have to create a loop because
Yes, because mine
to
worked
get
whenever there is a loop.
yeah to always when you want to find a vowel, you will need a loop so that you can go through all the characters.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions, guys? I think our 1 hour has elapsed, and this is like the basic introduction to C++ Builder, to everything that we are supposed to do this semester. We are building on top of this knowledge that we started with. So please don't be shy to ask any questions. You are welcome to post them there by the chat. There's also a discussion section on my Twitter or Brightspace. If you go to discussions there, and then you'll see there are sections already created. Ne? So currently all our questions will always fall under part 1 because we have not started with part B. So you get into part A, and then someone has already posted about an answer string, and he said, what is the difference between answer string and string? And then to reply to this thread, you will just click on the heading answer string there, and then it will take you inside, and then you'll see these are the replies to this question. So I have responded to this person there, and he also responded back by saying thank you, sir. But now if you want to start a new question from scratch, okay, then come to part A. After coming to part A, then you say start a new thread. Then this will allow you to post a new question which we can come and reply to. So please, guys, if there are some questions that you want to ask and it's not class time, you can always use the forum there. So Miss Molekwa says, yeah, I'll come to you, Mr. Mapopa. Miss Molekwa says, so basically whenever we have to assign default values to our variable, it must be always done within a construct. Yes, I will just say yes. Yes, Miss Molekwa, that's the idea. Mr. Mapopa, you may ask, sir.
Sir, I have a problem. I've been looking for a function on our. I think it's a tutorial or whatever. But even for future use, the function for the strings. There is a function for position. I agree for the function position is when we want to find the position of a certain character.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the function for finding the character at a certain index, where we insert the index number, then we have to find the character.
Is it not pause, Mr. Mbapop?
Because I've been trying pause, but the pause, it seems like it only accepts a character or a string actually.
Okay, and what do you want?
The function the one like in our triple one is add, where we insert the number.
Oh, add. Yes. Okay. Unfortunately, there's no equivalent method for add. Rather, what you can do again, let's say we have a line there, and then I will say relebogile elanga. That is the line. So what you can do there, in place of the add function, you can always use your your string as an array of functions. So you can replace the add with this to do that. This will, sorry, not 0, sorry, 1. Again, this will return what? This character, which is the first one. If you say 2, it will give you the second character. 3, 4, and so on and so on. So this is equivalent to the add method that we used to have in triple one.
Okay. So also on this data type string, the string doesn't work the same way as a normal array, whereby the first index is 0, then up to infinity Like the ANSI string, the first character is situated
One.
on
1. Yes, all the time.
Okay.
That's the only difference between 111 and TPG2. Ne?
Okay.
The string in TPG2, they start at index 1. That is why in the notes they said ANSI string is index 1 based, meaning the first character will always be situated on index 1.
All right.
And yes, Mr. Madam Malal, yes, we can. I'm going to try as hard as I can to make time every day. I mean, every weekday, Monday to Friday, to have these sessions from 4 to 5. I hope we can. I hope we can meet every day, but it's too much. But yeah, for this week, let's try until Friday, ne? To meet every day. I'll always send the link via Brightspace so that we can just try to catch up on some things. Okay, any other question? And yes, Kele, I will post the recording immediately after this session. I will post it there by Brightspace. I'll make a nice folder there called Ketchup, ne? And then you'll find it in there. All right, any other questions, guys? I think it's 5 and it's cold here in Limpopo. I'm not sure on that side how is it, but here it's cold, so I would actually like to knock off. Am I allowed to knock off?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All right.
Bye bye.
All right, thank you for attending, guys. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.
thank you.
All right, you're welcome.